Hello, everyone. As promised for this week, I asked you to go to the Nebraska legislative website, and here it is. I want to give just a very short demo on using this. In actuality, I'd like you to explore this site a little more for the activity this week, as well as actually thinking of this as a source of research to look up bills and laws that have already been passed. So I've already queued it up, and it's simply nebraskalegislature.gov. That will get you right to this homepage of the Nebraska Legislative website. So over on the left-hand column, you can see all the options that are available. And so what I would note is you can see there that there are a lot of avenues into being able to do research on bills and laws that have made their way through the legislative chamber. But I just want to point out a couple of things on the website that you might be interested in, and then sort of get to the meat of what I'm asking you to do this week. So I'm going to scroll down here to calendar first thing, and you'll see why in just a second. We are in the 106th legislature, second session, day 8, as I record this, and that's on the 21st of January 2000. So 106th legislature, second session, day 8. That's important. Let me show you the calendar. Here is the calendar of the second session. So it starts in January. Then you can see February here. And what you should know about the second session is it goes 60 legislative days. So there's January, we can go to February, and we can go to March, and let me go to April, see if we have any days. Yep, so April 23rd is the 60th legislative day of the session. So that means that days the legislature is actually in session count, other days don't. Why is that important? Because in the Nebraska legislature, the odd numbered years, 2019 for example, that's a 90-day session. The even numbered years are 60-day sessions. Why is that? Because the major budget laws are passed in the odd numbered years for the entire biennium, as it's called, the entire 2-year period. What the legislature does in the even numbered years is makes adjustments to that general fund budget. So that's why the shorter session is applied to the even numbered years and the 90-day session is applied to the odd numbered years. Still, that's not a lot of time to do all the things they have to do. And the major job, of course, is passing a budget in that 90-day session. And that's what they do. But you can see that's really not a lot of days. And of course, keep in mind that a legislator in the Nebraska legislature gets paid about $13,000 a year. So if you're spending January, February, March, April in the 60-day session away from whatever your regular job is, you can see the impact on a person. Okay, so let me go back to the homepage. Couple of other things that I want to show you as we're moving into this is news. And if you click on the news, you can see the unicameral update online. And unicameral, by the way, for those of you who do not live in Nebraska, and those who do, what you probably realize is that our legislative body is the only one of the 50 states that is a unicameral, a one-body legislature. It's not a House, it's not a Senate, it's the legislature, and the members are called senators, but there's only one body. If you go to the news and the unicameral update online, this is kind of nice because every session, what happens is every single day of the session, there's this little sort of mini online newspaper that talks about what's going on that day in the legislative day. So it is like a little news report. This happens to be, for the current legislative day. This one's dated January 21st. So that's a nice feature as well. All right. Let me go back to the home page right? Here's the homepage. Okay, so before I move into the meat of what I wanted to talk about with the exercise for the week, I want to show you two important things that you want to know. First is senators. So if I click on this tab called Senators, and the one that says Senators web pages. Okay, the reason I click on that, here we go with the list of all the senators. So this one's listed in alphabetical order. You can also sort by district, starting with District 1. There are 49 members of the Nebraska unicameral. 49 members, one of whom is the Speaker of the legislature. So there are 49 districts in the state of Nebraska. Now, if you actually click on the individual senators, you'd be able to get to their website. The other thing that I think is important for you to know if you live in Nebraska is who your state senator is. Don't be embarrassed if you don't. That's a very common thing for people not to know. And if you look at the districts in Nebraska, so think 49 districts for a state the geographic size of Nebraska, they're probably close to half those districts are, or around half those districts are between the Omaha metro area and the Lincoln metro area. In western Nebraska, where the population is not dense at all compared to the cities, we have single senators representing a large several county areas. In Omaha and Lincoln, the districts are geographically much smaller, but the population of the district is essentially tried to be evened out among the senators. So that's important to know as well. Let me go back to the homepage. Okay, so one last thing, and that is I want to talk about process, and this is going to help you through looking for policies on bills, proposed bills, introduced bills, and passed bills as well. Let me go to this thing that says for citizens, fourth from the bottom here. Okay, about the legislature, and you can see all these things about the legislature in it, the glossary of terms. I want to talk about the legislature, which is how legislation flows through the legislature. Okay, so I clicked on about the legislature, and you can see a little hot link here in the first paragraph that says this section provides information about the legislative process. Let me click on legislative process. So here it is. Okay, so here is how a bill flows through the Nebraska legislature. So look at this. Look at these categories here in the middle of the page. Idea, introduction, committee, general file, enrollment and review, select file, final reading, governor, and laws of Nebraska. Okay, so going back to the idea of the policy cycle, some of this actually lines up nicely with the terminology from the policy cycle. So idea, I click on idea. First, a senator and his or her staff research a problem and study possible legislative remedies. A senator may introduce a bill to create a new law, repeal an existing law, or change a law. The legislature has a research division that helps senators with their research project, and it goes on here. So that sounds a lot like agenda setting, right? That there's something of interest that this senator feels should be on the legislative agenda, and so is going to propose a bill to put it on the agenda. So that's the idea phase. And then we have the introduction phase. All right, so here, this is the first step in the technical process, that the senator brings that idea to a person called a bill drafter, a specialist employee working with the legislature to help put ideas into legislative language and to introduce that bill on the floor. So the senator then must introduce the bill in the first 10 days of the legislative session. This is really important right here in the middle paragraph. Most bills are introduced during the first 10 days of the legislative session, which begins in January. Okay, so that is the first time that a senator introduces a bill is really in that first 10 days. So you see a lot of activity in the first 10 days of the legislative session because senators are introducing a lot of bills. And really, right away, nothing happens with that, just the bills are introduced. Okay, so then we go to the next process step called committee. So the reference committee determines where bills go to the 14 standing committees. So essentially what happens is for most bills, if they go to committee, they're going to receive some kind of public hearing. And the public hearings are going to last anywhere from a very short period, maybe just minutes, to all day. But they're depending on the, kind of the issue, how many people are interested in it, the hearings can get, fairly routine or can become pretty exciting. But the committee is the first step after a bill is introduced. That's important because we go to the next step, which is called general file. Okay, so what happens in committee is the committee decides whether this should go back to the full legislature. If it does, it's put on what's called the general file. And so this is essentially the first time that a bill is read for consideration. So what has to happen is that the senators have to vote to continue the process of this. So 25 votes are required. That is a majority, 25 of 49. That's a simple majority to adopt the amendments that might have been put on the bill or just the bill itself bare without amendments to the next stage in the process. So first reading basically is general file. Then it goes to what's called enrollment and review. That's where if there are any amendments to that bill, everything's incorporated into the bill. And then the bill is actually sort of proofread. It's checked for its accuracy. So now we have a bill that's passed its first reading and it's engrossed and registered as a passed general file bill. So step one, really, of voting. Step two of voting is the select file. So this is where the bill is read again on the floor and now it can be debated again. So at this stage, the senators themselves are going to either forward the bill, let it move through the system, or they're just going to indefinitely postpone it, right? So a lot of bills don't ever get past this stage. And then the bills that do get past that stage come to what is called the final reading. Okay, at this stage, the entire bill with amendments as engrossed and registered and reviewed is put in for a vote of the full legislature. So votes require a simple majority to get past the final reading, unless it's a constitutional amendment kind of thing, which requires a 4/5 vote. So this is the last time that the legislature sees a bill, right? Before it goes to the governor. Now we're into, of course, the legislative body sending a bill to the executive body, the governor. So the governor decides to pass a bill or not. The governor might decline to act on it, in which case it becomes a bill without the governor's signature, or the veto may the governor may veto a bill, and the governor also, because most states have this, we don't have this at the national level, the governor may apply what is called a line item veto. So essentially what the governor is saying is, I veto the money, that the appropriation that goes against this bill. So what you see at the end of the session, particularly in the even or the odd numbered years, is there are several line item vetoes that any governor applies to the full slate of bills. And these go back to the legislature for override of the bills, which requires 30 senators. So this is a normal activity. It would be very unusual for the governor not to apply the line item veto to, any number of bills. So once that whole process takes place, it's gone to the governor. The governor has either signed it or has vetoed it with a line item veto, and the legislature chooses to override or not. It becomes a law. So basically, the laws don't take effect right away unless they have an emergency clause attached to them. Most laws take effect about 3 months after the session is over. So that's process. So why is that important? Let me go back to the home page. What I've asked you to do is look at bills, and this is going to be the last thing I'm going to do. And again, I'd love for you to explore this website, particularly in reports, where you could actually get some budget information, because we talked about budgets, and you can get the budget story, if you will, on the general fund budget from the legislative perspective right there. Basically, what is on this website in terms of budgets are the budgets that have been passed by the legislature in any given year. So I want to come up to this one that says bills and laws. So this is what I'm asking you to do for the discussion. Okay, so I'm going to go to the thing that says search bills. Notice the little search engine here. We can search by date of introduction, search by introducer, search by committee referral, or search by keyword. So all those are your options. If you know the LB number, legislative bill number, you could actually put that in. Notice the default is on the 106th legislature, the session that is currently going on, 2019-2020. Again, each legislative session has 2 years, so we're in the second year of the 106th legislature. But if you knew there was something that was discussed in a previous legislature, on the drop-down menu, you see you can find any other legislative session. So I've asked you to look at about 10 bills, and what I'd really like you to do is, if you know your own state senator, that might be a place to start. You might want to do it by keyword. You might want to do it by introducer. I'm going to show you how to do it by introducer, and I'm going to pick out a couple introducers just to show you something. Just because I happen to follow this a little bit, and if you follow it just for a few days, you can kind of learn some of this stuff. There are some senators that introduce a lot of legislation, and there are some senators that don't introduce very much at all. So I'm going to. Here is Senator Harrold Blood. She's from Bellevue. She happens to be one of the state senators that's pretty active in introducing legislation. So let's click on Senator Blood. And so it puts her name here. And note here, I have this box I can check to include co-sponsored. So that would mean legislative bills introduced by other senators that Senator Blood has added her name on as co-sponsor. But I'm not going to click that for now, because I just want to see ones that she has introduced during this session. So there's the senator in question. I click on this search, and all the bills that Senator Blood has proposed in the 106th session are going to show up here. So when you get to this page, here's what you ought to note. Because there's 2 years in each legislative session, it's going to show all the bills that she introduced for 2019 and 2020. So the 2020 bills are, most of them start around in the 700s and 800 range. And the other ones happen to be ones that were introduced in 2020. So let me, actually should have checked this in advance, but let me look up here at about 750. Okay, so that was introduced in 2020. So somewhere in the 700 range, the 2020 session is starting. So here's what you'll see. And again, Senator Blood, you're going to see the status of the bill that she introduced in either 2019 or 2020. So look at the status column. We have referral, it was referred to a committee. We have passed. That means it was passed by the legislature. Still doesn't tell us whether the governor signed it or vetoed it, but it is passed by the legislature. Here's one that made it to the general file. Here's one that was indefinitely proposed. Here's one that she withdrew. So what you should notice here is that most bills that state senators propose probably don't get passed. They introduce a lot more than are passed. So now, towards the bottom of this sheet, The ones, as I said, probably in the 700 range, are ones that Senator Blood has introduced in this year, in 2020, during the session so far. So I think we're in day 8 or 9 right now as I narrate this on the 21st of January. So she's introduced all these bills since then, right? And where are they at? So a lot of them are already in referral. That means that they were introduced and they have been referred, sorry about that, they have been introduced and referred to a committee. So they're in committee right now. You notice one just says introduction. And then I want to show you one last thing. There are also LRs. These are legislative resolutions. These are really sort of perfunctory and celebratory things that, anybody in a legislative body has the prerogative to do, and they take advantage of it. So look at LR 39. Congratulate Madison DeMayo on her ongoing efforts helping those in need. LR 46, recognize March 19th, 2019 as Celebrating Women in Public Office Day. LR 289, congratulate the Bellevue West High School football team on winning the 2019 Class A state championship. So, you're probably not going to see much opposition in, the legislature for making a resolution that does that. We're really interested in the bills and what they do. And so if you just look at what Carol Blood has introduced, you can see some topics that you may be interested in. Prohibit discrimination based on military or veteran status. So if we want to look at LB 750, I'm going to click on the bill there, and you can say she introduced this on January 8th, which I think was the first day of session. So prohibit discrimination based on military veteran status. Okay, so now what I want you to notice here on this page is that as we track the status of a bill, it goes in reverse chronological order. So that the first date is at the bottom and the next action is going to be up here. And I'm going to show you a past bill in a second here so you kind of get the idea. Okay, so what does this say? Well, if you want to read it, you can click on Introduced, and you're going to see the bill pop up as introduced by Senator Blood. So you can see that a bill writer helped her write all this. This is where you get all this stuff, what a law relates to, right? And the committee that it's probably going to go to. So so after this, it'll say something like being enacted by the people of the state of Nebraska. And then you're going to get to the meat of the law itself, or the bill itself. It's not a law yet. Notwithstanding any other law or laws heretofore enacted, all cities and villages in the state shall have the power by ordinance to define, regulate, suppress, and prevent discrimination on the basis of race, color, creed, religion, ancestry, sex, marital status, national origin, familial status, handicap as defined, and so this underlined part in line 8 is really what Senator Blood added to the law, the Nebraska law 18-1724, or military veteran status. So what does this bill do? It adds military or veteran status as essentially a protected category under this non-discrimination law. So in this case, you can kind of get the point of where she's going with this law. Okay, so let's go back again. I'm going to hit the back arrow and hopefully the whole list of hers comes up. So let's go back to the first year of this session and find a past law. So here is the Counterfeit Airbag Prevention Act, LB 87, was passed. So, again, here, the reason I want to show you this page is because, again, reverse chronological order, she introduced this around the first day of the session in 2019, a year ago. And then here's all the steps that this bill took. You can actually see that several senators added their name as co-sponsors of the bill. Hilkeman, Hunt, Slama, and then so it was referred to the Judiciary Committee. There was a hearing, a notice of hearing issued. There was a hearing for it. Then it went out of committee to the general file. It went to the Judiciary Committee. Then it was advanced to enrollment and review, as we discussed before. It was placed on the select file. And then it got to the final reading and it passed the legislature. So in this case, It was presented to the governor on March 1st and signed into law by the governor on March 12th. So that's a passed law. Now, what's the difference between a passed law and a bill? So on the passed law, we actually have more categories to choose from up here in this top part of the menu. We can actually see the slip law, which is basically the final draft of the law that went to the governor. So this is kind of the final draft of what the governor signed in under the slip law. There's a couple other things that are going to show up mostly for passed bills, and that's in this additional info column. Let me go to the bottom. Well, this you might be interested in this depending on the circumstance. A view of all recorded votes, so you can actually see how popular this bill was. So this bill passed pretty handily. So you can see the final reading was a 44-0-0 vote. There were some 5 senators who didn't vote on it. But so that may or may not be important to you. But you also see things like the statement of intent, the committee statement, and the fiscal note, if applicable. So let's click on statement of intent and see if we have one. Yes. So lots of times for the passed bills, you're going to see a statement of intent. And this actually is supposed to be more of a plain English explanation of what the official sounding legislative bill says. So this says the following constitutes the reason for this bill and the purposes which are sought. And so it starts talking about counterfeit supplemental restraint systems, and that in the final paragraph, anyone who knowingly installs a counterfeit airbag will face at least a Class 2 felony with penalties increasing depending on the severity of injury due to malfunction and number of times the person has been caught. So what she's actually stating, this is, I am solving a problem, a policy problem, which is counterfeit airbags are being installed in cars. So I'm going to assume what this is referring to is aftermarket kinds of installations that a mechanical shop, or probably not a dealer, but just a mechanical shop would install on a vehicle. So the problem is that these can be counterfeited and lead to injuries or death if they're used. So that is her statement of intent. So this is kind of getting to what we're talking about with this week's exercise. And then I want to see if there's a fiscal note. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. Let's find the latest fiscal note, February 4th. No. So a fiscal note actually is applied by the legislative fiscal analyst. So what a fiscal note does is, if they think there's an impact on an agency of the state, and that could be the university, by the way, but if the bill is going to cause a fiscal impact on any agency, then that agency is required to develop a fiscal note. But you can see on this one, at the very bottom, no basis to dispute the Nebraska Board of Parole estimated no fiscal impact from the agency to LB7. So there's no fiscal agency. Why did the Nebraska Board of Parole weigh in on this? If you look in the language, and I'm looking real quick, they're talking about the idea that there were criminal penalties attached to violation of this law. So is there an impact on this? That's why that's there. Okay, so that's, in a nutshell, I wanted to show you what Senator Blood does. And I said that Senator Blood is one of the senators who introduces a lot of legislation. You could actually go and see senators that don't introduce very much, and I happen to know of a couple. So let me show you. I'm going to go back down to introducer, and I am going to go to Senator. This is the alphabetical order one. I'm going to go to Senator Clements, who is District 2. Search on Senator Clements, District 2. So again, look at this list. This is the whole 106th session, which is 2019 and 2020. And so what I'd like you to notice here is all these are 2019. The first one, that's 2019. So the first one in 2020 is LB 844. So that's a bill that Senator Clements introduced in this current year session, and LB 1024. So compare this list with Senator Blood's list, and this may actually be an interesting exercise for you to do just sort of informally, just to see how much activity each senator has, including the senator from your district. Okay, so again, going to go back to the home page, and I gave you the instructions for the discussion. I'd like you to get about 5 bills that have been introduced for the current year, that's 2020 of the 106th session. Get about 5 bills that have passed. That doesn't mean they had to have been signed by the governor necessarily, but passed through the legislature. And compare those and see if you can't tease out legislative intent and the problem, sort of the policy problem that the senator is purporting to solve by introducing this legislative bill. Last thing on that activity, they don't all have to be from the same senator. You know, you can pick a whole range of senators to use for this exercise. So that's the quick review of the legislative website, and I will end it there. Thanks for your attention.